My earring's caught in my hair. Okay, let's begin.
The Naked Umbrella Thieves by Ian Wilde.
The Naked Umbrella Thieves follows the story of Sergeant Serrano O'Hara, so called because he has like a ridiculously massive nose. All of the buildings in the local area hate human beings and are kicking people out. The lost property cupboard has run away with an attic bedroom. There's a one-legged murderer. There's disgruntled ghosts floating about the place who were woken up by a rave. There's just a lot for him to deal with. So if you like avant-garde humour and mystery stories and detectives and ghosts, and if you've ever thought about Mary Poppins in a more than friendly fashion, this is the book for you. Just as a side note, Ian Wilde also wrote the play Pirates in Short Pants, which I'm rehearsing for at the moment.
Atonement by Ian McEwan.
Atonement is a really beautifully written book, and it's all about misperception and how our misperception of others can actually be really damaging to them and to ourselves. And I don't want to give anything away because it's a real it's a story that you want to watch unfold at your own pace. All I am going to say is that it's completely amazing and you should read it and you will cry.
The Book Thief by Marcus Ozak.
It's set in Germany in 1939, so it's the height of the war. The Nazi party are in power. It's about a 9-year-old girl called Liesel who's taken in by a foster family. The story is told from the point of view of death, which is really weird when you first start reading it. You're like, whoa, what's this? What's going on? It's just a really interesting storytelling device because obviously death is everywhere and can see everything that's going on. So you get to see everything about this little girl, just everything that's going on in her life.
Killing Yourself to Live by Chuck Klosterman.
The book follows Chuck Klosterman, who's a music journalist, and he's on a road trip around America visiting the death sites of famous musicians. Mainly it's just Chuck driving around in his car listening to music and thinking about his failed relationships and potential future relationships and what sort of music would be played at his funeral or what he wants the last song he ever hears to be, before he dies. So I really like that because there's nothing really factual in here. There's nothing journalistic about it. It's supposed to be, he's supposed to be doing research for this article that he's going to write for the magazine that he works for. But it just completely becomes his journey and his musings and his wonderings and his wanderings. And if you're interested in music or if you're interested in death, it's a really good read.
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold. I remember saying something like, "I feel a bit lightheaded. Maybe you should drive." And suddenly there was a terrible roar all around us, and the sky was full of what looked like huge bats, all swooping and screeching and diving around the car, which was going about 100 miles an hour with the top down to Las Vegas. And a voice was screaming, "Holy Jesus, what are these goddamn animals?" When I was younger, like about 10, 12, I was completely obsessed and completely in love with Johnny Depp, as I think all girls are at that age. So I was trying to watch all of his films, and I watched Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and then I went, fuck, this is a really good movie. And I saw the book in the bookshop one day, and I thought, oh, I should give that a read, and just fell head first into this world of just too many drugs, like far too many drugs, more drugs than anybody needs. It's a really, really interesting read, and it has a lot more depth than you would expect it to.
Shakespeare by Bill Bryson.
Bill Bryson obviously is a wonderful writer, and I'm obsessed with Shakespeare, so this is great. It's really well researched, and there's none of the bullshit that you find in other Shakespeare biographies, you know, all this kind of padding and speculation. He just purely gives you, these are the facts that we know, but because it's Bill Bryson writing it, it's told in a really entertaining, really engaging way. So if you're weird like me and you love Shakespeare, this is an essential read. It's so good. But even if you're not particularly interested, but you're studying Shakespeare for a college course or even in school, this is the book that you want to read, because it's short, it's funny, it's engaging and entertaining, and it is just the pure hard facts.
The Writer's Tale by Russell T Davies and Benjamin Cook.
This is the updated version. So it chronicles 2 years of correspondence between the two of them, while Russell T Davies is writing Series 4 and the specials of his, like the end of his run on Doctor Who. It's a really interesting insight into the process of writing, you know, the behind the scenes kind of slog and misery of sitting down and typing and trying to make the ideas in your head into words. It's really good, you know, it's really funny, it's sad at points, it's I've just opened a page and the title is Stephen Moffat's Thighs. So that's the kind of thing you can expect. It's a really interesting read and really helpful in terms of if you want to write things. So, yeah.
Good Girls Don't by Claire Hennessy.
This is the story of Emily Keating and, you know, her life, her loves, the drama going on. She's a 17-year-old girl living in Dublin. And she also happens to be bisexual. So, on top of all the, you know, boy drama and girl drama, there's also people in her school find out that she's bisexual and they're all kind of dicks about it. So there's that going on as well. But reading this book when I was that age was the first time I ever went, shit, I like girls as well as boys. Like those feelings that I'm feeling for girls that I try not to think about because they're confusing. That's me fancying girls in the same way that I fancy guys. Basically, I realised I was bisexual at the same time that I realised it was okay to be bisexual. So, you know, that was handy. So this book certainly changed my life. But I mean, apart from all that, apart from the personal stuff that I feel about this book, it's genuinely just a really good story. It's a really good young adult novel, and it deals with sex and sexuality and drinking and drugs and love and hate and pain in a really relatable and I think really supportive and really responsible way. She's not condemned for it, but at the same time it's not glamorized. It's a very truthful story. And it feels very real and it's very comforting to be able to just, when you're young and you're going through all of these things, to be able to open a book and to be able to read someone going through the same shit as you and being just as confused and going, okay, it's alright to be confused because I'm not the only person that's confused, you know? I love the character of Emily. She's really interesting. She wants to be a filmmaker, she's obsessed with movies, and she's really, really dedicated to just taking care of all of her friends and making sure that they're okay. She kind of puts her own life and her own desires sort of on the back burner to take care of other people, and it takes her a while to realise actually it's okay to take care of yourself as well, you know, which I think is an important lesson to learn, that it's okay to take care of yourself and put yourself first in certain situations, you know. I actually don't recommend this book to people often, just because it feels like giving away a very personal part of myself. This book feels like a part of me. And so the chance that I would recommend it to someone, like give it to a friend to read, and that they wouldn't get it, makes me really nervous, because it would be like they didn't understand me if they didn't understand this, you know? So that's a scary one to add to the list. Claire Hennessy, who wrote it, is a really good young adult writer. She hasn't written anything in a while, but her first book was published when she was like 12. Or she wrote it when she was 12 and it was published when she was 14. I'm not sure. She was either 12 or 14 when her first book was published. Like, that's mental. That makes me feel like such an underachiever. The book just before this is called Always. Stereotype is about a girl called Abby who suffers from depression, which I can certainly relate to. And she wants to be a writer, and she kind of lives quite an introverted life. And then she meets this girl called Emily, who is the Emily from this book, and becomes friends with her, and finds out that Emily has a little crush on her and kind of is flattered but doesn't really reciprocate it. So you just think, oh, Emily's this really cool character, and then Emily is a really cool character. She's such a cool character that she had to get her own book. And I'm so glad that, because, you know, Stereotype was written first, I'm just so immensely glad that Claire Hennessy was interested enough in Emily to write her own book, because I don't know what my life would be like if this book didn't exist and I hadn't read it. I genuinely don't. I don't know what kind of person I would be. Sex and sexuality are such a non-issue for Emily. You know, maybe they're a bigger deal for her friends and other characters in the book, but to her, it's just something that happens, and, you know, if you want to have sex, you can have sex, and that's fine. If you don't want to have sex, you don't have to have sex, and that's also fine, you know? And reading that when I was young, I just sort of accepted that because I was really young when I read this, I just thought, oh, okay, that's just how the world is then, fine. And so I carried that attitude with me throughout school and up until now. That's still how I feel about sex and sexuality and all of that. So this book shaped my worldview, and I think it did it for the better. So, okay, I'm gonna stop ranting about this now, but just, I love it so much.
Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman.
I'm a bit obsessed with the London Underground and like sewers and underworld places, and this is set under the streets of London. It's about a man called Richard Mayhew who you know, has a boring desk job and a fiance and is living a very normal life. And one day he's walking down the street with his fiance, and he sees this girl lying in the middle of the path, and she's injured, and he's like, oh, I should take care of her, and the fiance's like, oh, she's just some random homeless woman, leave her alone. But he feels this overwhelming need to just help her. So he takes her home to his flat and he bandages up her wounds because she's bleeding. But then all these strange things start happening, and, you know, he helps her get home and he's sort of forgetting about her, and then people come looking for her and his life gets just totally fucked up, and he ends up wandering around under the streets of London looking for her to try and sort of make sense of what's going on. It's really, really good. It's a wonderful fantasy novel and a great story, and it's so anchored in the real world that it just feels really genuine. If you're not going to read the book, definitely listen to this. I think it's on YouTube somewhere. It's not supposed to be, but I think it's on YouTube somewhere.
Howls Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones.
Basically, Sophie is an 18-year-old girl living in Ingray. Her dad owns a hat shop, and she's got 2 younger sisters who are like technically her half-sisters because her dad remarried. Because she's the eldest of 3, she thinks she's going to have a very boring life. You know, the eldest does the boring thing, the middle one does a slightly less boring thing, and the youngest always goes off and has the adventures. That's just what all of the stories say, so that's what she assumes her life is going to be like. And one day, the Witch of the Waste comes in disguise, and they have a disagreement, and she turns Sophie into an old woman. And Sophie goes, "Oh, well, this is a shame. I think I'll just go out and, you know, see if Wizard Howl can take the curse off me. He won't be interested in me because I'm not a hot young girl anymore. I'm an old lady, so he's not going to hurt me. Fuck it, I'll just go hang out with him and live in his house." And so she just shows up at his house, and he's like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" She's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just hanging out here now." And doesn't give a shit about anything because she's old, and she thinks, well, what's the worst that could happen to me? I mean, I've already been turned into an old woman. I don't give a shit anymore. And just starts being totally badass because, like, she doesn't think that anything bad can happen to her now because the worst has already happened. So Sophie's a total badass. Howl is just adorably useless and also mysterious and weird and cool. And I can't even describe it because it's just so good, and you need to read it immediately. Read the book, it's so good! Ugh. If you liked this strange, hyperactive, incomprehensible video, please like it and subscribe to my channel, and I will try to be more together next time. Alright, see you! Bye! Bye! I need to stop singing at the end of videos.